it in simplest terms. If you woke up every morning and I told you you suck at what you did, that you don't belong doing what you do, that you shouldn't be here, that this guy should be here, that you haven't earned this right, and then you have somebody else come in and tell you, dude, you are the best fit for this. Like, you are accurate. How would it make you feel listening to one or the other? And you hear it more and more. You start to actually believe that. Basically been, 2 years of training that out of not just me, but, a couple of the guys as well that have been here since my rookie year.
Neek, after having a little bit of time to think on what Tua said, how do you feel about the rawness of his emotion and speaking about his experiences with Brian Flores?
Yeah, I think that the more honesty that we can get out of players, the better off we are. It doesn't mean that everything that they say, it means that their perspective is their perspective. So I haven't spoken to Brian Flores about his position. I imagine that he doesn't think of himself as a terrible person. And he probably thought he was motivating Tua and those sorts of things. So I think everybody's perspective is important, but the most important position on a football team is the quarterback. And it's important that you, as the head coach, figure out how to coach that player the best way you can. And I think that Tua right now is demonstrating that he is comfortable and confident, and that's the type of leader that you want on your team. So the past is the past, but the way that he's carrying himself right now would give me confidence if I was a Dolphins player.
Kimberly, what is it like to have someone who empowers you the way Mike McDaniel has Tua Tagovailoa?
Listen, we're all confident, but what Tua is describing sounds like a toxic relationship. And he seems like a guy who is now removed from that and now feels like himself. You know, like sometimes you're like driving, you pull into the driveway and you just sit in the car and you're like, I don't really feel like going inside right now. I just need a minute to just like decompress. He sounds like a guy who was beat up mentally, like that. Like you laughing, people know what that feeling is like. And in sports,
I don't. I have no idea what that feeling is like. I get in my driveway excited. Can't wait to get in there.
Does not.
I'm
Dominique
racing in there.
Does not.
Bow.
I can't wait to get in the door.
Right through the doorway.
But he's happy. You have friends who, when they come out of that bad relationship and now they're in a good one, and they just feel different. And I think you cannot coach quarterbacks like every other position. And I've seen so many quarterbacks stumble and fail to reach their full potential, not because they're not talented, but because something in here is off, because a lot of times it's the situation. A lot of times it's the coaching, which is why you sometimes see quarterbacks go to other situations and all of a sudden it's like, oh, what happened? Oh, he's good. He was always good, but the situation is different. And kudos to Tua for speaking his truth, because it's a very difficult position to play.
RC, I think Neek nailed it. When you think about the job description of a coach, it's to get the most out of your players. And I was encouraged by what Brian Flores said, which is, hey, this is a learning experience for me, because clearly he did not get the most out of Tua the way Coach McDaniels is. And I think one of the things we've all seen, we've all been around coaches, the best coaches know that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And you made the point earlier, RC, about, Brian Flores was in one system for a while. That system worked. And I think if Brian Flores could go back in time, he would understand that, maybe on certain players, veteran players, established players, ones that have been paid, I could be as tough as nails. Others may not be as confident as maybe I thought they were. So hopefully this is a learning experience for him, and he could go on and get another opportunity.
Well, the side of this is Brian Flores, who had an opportunity. He's now the defensive coordinator in Minnesota to address Tua Tagovailoa's comments, and here's what he said.
Look, I'm human, so, that hit me in a way that, I wouldn't say it was, positive for me. But at the same time, I've got to use that and say, hey, how can I grow from that? How can I be better? I think there's things that I could do better, for sure, and I've grown in that way, and I've tried to apply the things that I could do better and the things that I've learned, over the last, 2-3 years. But I would say over the long haul, I've had a lot of great relationships over my 21-year career here in the league.
Dom, what do you think about Brian Flores' response?
That was masterful. Like, that guy's obviously going to be a head coach again in this league. I don't know if he believes it or not, but that's the right way that you respond in that situation. It's it's not an apology, but it's him it's not him pointing fingers, because I think the easiest thing to do right there would be, and the instinct for most of it is to be like, yeah, maybe I did something wrong, but you did this, but you did that. He's like, no, I take full responsibility. All I can control is me. I'm going to learn from that and get better. And I appreciate that. That's the right way to handle this experience, and that's the right way to go forward. And I get it. It's super high pressure. You are in one of the most high pressure jobs in this country, and there's millions of dollars riding on it. I understand if you look over at some 20-something-year-old and you feel like he messed it up, I would want to dog cuss him too. But that's not how you're gonna coach. That's not how you're gonna get better. You're like, this is my job. I worked my whole life to get to this spot. And he didn't handle it properly, but he did handle that response properly.
It's not that I didn't like his comments, because I think that's a difficult spot for Brian Flores, who we're all a fan of, to be in. And Ryan, you said a great word first hour, which was grace. In these situations, we're all human, right? But I think starting off his comments with like, "Hey, man, I'm human," like
But
that? No.
Okay, I don't mean to cut you off, but to be clear, he was saying he was human, and so the comments affected him. He wasn't saying he was human, so he did.
No. I totally get it. I think because I sympathize with Tua in that people just put it on the quarterbacks and not realizing, like, it's not just about them. It is about you as a head coach. It's about you as an organization. And Brian Flores may have wanted a different quarterback at the time that he was a head coach, but this is the guy you have. And you don't get better as a team by berating him. And I understand he's taking accountability for that. But what I will say is Harrison Phillips, who was one of the players who was standing next to Brian Flores in that clip, he talked about how when Flores first started, he wasn't sure. He was a little on edge. He was a little like reticent, like, I don't know what we're getting. And that speaks to players' talk. That speaks to what happened in Miami and what they were getting. And now, having been around Brian Flores, Harrison Phillips and these defensive players see, here's a guy who is committed to relationship first. And I think, to Brian Flores' credit, he did learn from that Miami situation with Tua.
I've been around coaches in all different roles for a long time. The best, Coach Belichick, Coach Parcells, had the privilege of representing Steve Kerr, amongst others. The number one thread among successful coaches, Dan Campbell, for example, Dan Quinn, was their ability to listen, to learn, and to grow. And I was really encouraged, again, by what Brian Flores said, because maybe it wasn't said perfectly, but the authenticity of his emotions, he clearly was hurt and stung by it.
Yeah.
And I think he'll grow from it. And when we talk about Nick Saban, Bill Belichick, those guys were all fired at different points of his career. Yeah. And if we were running an organization, we were creating a short list, sure, I'd bring in Brian, like, tell us what you learned. What's going to be different this time? Yeah. And again, I think what's really important, Nick talked about, like, dog cussing a player. Like, there's a time and place where you could coach players hard. But again, like, I think what Brian has to probably do is say, like, what player am I talking to? Where am I with them? Like, the way Bill Belichick had handled Tom Brady was probably different in year 18 than it was different in year 2 or 3.
Yeah, Nick, in listening to what Brian Flores is, the way he's speaking, it sounds like he's learned different things. He had so many years under Bill Belichick, and then after leaving Miami, he had 1 year under Mike Tomlin, who's one of the best leaders of men I've ever been around. How can an experience like that allow you to learn and change? And it seems that he's moved forward well.
Yeah, I think you got to be open to understanding, and the word human came up a couple times, understanding that you are human and that you don't have all the answers, and there is no one way to do anything. I think absolutes are for, like, children. Like, I tell my 8-year-old, never cross the street unless the walk sign is up. But me, when I get out there, I can look both ways and shoot across the street. So I understand that nothing is absolutely true all the time. And I think there is a time when you got to get in a player's face with specific players. And hopefully you have a relationship that you can do that. And there is a time when you have to pat him on the back and lift him up. When it's a young player that hasn't established anything in this league, thinking that, I don't think, my assumption is Brian Flores wasn't, like, angrily yelling at him. Brian Flores was thinking, all right, I'm going to get this guy fired up. I'm going to get him locked in by telling him how bad he is. That doesn't work for a lot of players, and we talked about this yesterday. That's not something that would have worked for me. I had coaches try that, and I'm like, Are we on the same team or not? And so I think it's important
right.
that Brian Flores has demonstrated that he understands that he can continue to get better and he can learn and grow, because being adaptable is one of the most important things about being a coach, not just in the way that you coach, but in the schemes that you put out on the field. So him showing that he can learn and grow is really impressive. Like you, showing that you can learn and grow and host the hell out of this show. The transitions you've been doing been out of this world. Just off the top.